Bonsoir les amis, j'espère que vous allez bien. I have some very important updates that I'm happy to share with you. Right now, in Geneva, Switzerland, policymakers from 179 countries are in the final stages of negotiations for a global plastic treaty. So this session began a few days ago on August 5th and it will end tomorrow. The goal is to agree on a legally binding international agreement to reduce plastic pollution. So let's talk a little bit about what is going on and most importantly, how will this affect beauty companies, especially here in the United States. So first thing first, this whole thing began in 2022 when the United Nations created a resolution to end plastic pollution with a focus on oceans. Since that time, countries met 5 times, and the 2024 meeting that took place in South Korea was supposed to be the final one. But countries, they could not agree on critical and major issues. First of all, because this is not another environmental agreement with no real consequences. This is a legally binding treaty. It means that the countries who sign this agreement might need to adjust by changing their domestic laws to match what's in the agreement. And second of all, this is not about just cleaning the beach. The agreement is about monitoring the entire plastic production life cycle from production and design to use and disposal. Now, the beauty sector, of course, heavily relies on plastic packaging like bottles, sample containers, pumps, even in formulations, things like glitter, microbeads, they use that kind of stuff. So if this treaty limits plastic production or bans some additives, beauty brands, and we're talking about, brands that are not very sustainable, they will need to, if they're, for example, using plastic for their packaging, they're gonna need to switch to sustainable alternatives like glass or aluminium, biodegradable bioplastic. They will also need to reformulate products to remove things like les microplastiques. They will need to provide more supply chains transparency to be more compliant. Now, all of this means, unfortunately for these brands, increased short-term costs, but it can also create market advantage for companies that are already using luxury and sustainable packaging. Now, in the United States, things work a little differently. Even if this treaty is agreed upon in Geneva, it does not automatically apply to us. Why? Because under the Constitution, a treaty must be ratified, and at least 2/3 of the US Senate must approve it. 2/3 means 67 out of 100 senators must say yes. They must vote and say yes, this we agree, okay? If they don't, it does not apply to us. So yes, the United States is part of those negotiations, and even if it signs, but the Congress, the Senate, does not ratify, is legally speaking not required to follow those rules here at home. But that does not mean that there is no impact, because other countries that adopt the treaty can still enforce rules on, for example, imports. If, for example, the European Union puts a ban on certain plastic packaging under the treaty, any United States beauty brand selling to the EU will need to change its packaging to meet those rules, even if the United States never ratifies. Or if Japan sets a new chemical safety standard for plastic under this treaty, United States exporters would have to reformulate products or change their containers to be allowed in Japanese markets. So this is especially very important for beauty companies that trade internationally, because even if we don't ratify here in the US, still need to meet the treaty standards to access other markets. In economics, this is something called the spillover effect. The rules in one market can influence business practices in other markets, especially when those markets are major trading partners. So let's see what's gonna happen tomorrow. Let me know if you have any questions, and we'll talk again very soon.